So I'm delighted to introduce and welcome Diarmuid O'Muchu, and he is presenting at Chartres, as you know, and we really want to talk about his work. First, I'd like really to formally introduce you, Diarmuid, to our folks. Some of the Veritas people may not know of your work, and others perhaps do. So, Diarmuid O'Murchu is a priest in the Sacred Heart Missionary Order, a graduate of Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland, and is a social psychologist and author of numerous books that expand our understanding of spirituality from an evolutionary point of view. His latest work is directed towards adults who seek mature, meaningful roles rather than codependent faith that has not changed beyond our early religious upbringing. Diarmuid O'Murchu spent most of his working life in social ministry, including as a couples counselor in bereavement and HIV/AIDS counseling with unhoused people and refugees. He is the author of several pioneering books, including Reclaiming Spirituality, and now that has moved on to ecological spirituality, quantum theology, evolutionary faith, the transformation of desire, ancestral grace, adult faith, incarnation, a new evolutionary threshold, are some of his books, most of his books, but there are many others. So welcome, Diarmuid, welcome. It's a delight to have you. So, and Veritas is sort of new to you too, I think. You're aware of Chartres Cathedral and the Labyrinth, but we're sort of new, perhaps the work that we've done at Chartres over the years, since 1998. So I have been kind of tracking you. Reclaiming Spirituality was one of the earliest books I read of your work, and it really is groundbreaking, and you've been working all these many years to really help give us, mostly people in the Christian tradition, but much broader as well, a much more broad grounding in an evolutionary point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how you came to this. You were raised in the Roman Church. You talk about some of your early experiences in your book. Tell me a little bit about that evolution for you.
Right. So thank you for having me, and greetings to everybody who's joining in our conversation. So my upbringing in rural Ireland had me kind of grounded in the Celtic tradition, which is very much about a love of nature and finding the Holy One, the divine God, whatever word we use, in the sacredness of nature itself. And then as a young student, when I was studying theology, I came across the works of the great Jesuit priest and paleontologist called Teilhard de Chardin. And that was the one that began to remind me that the inherited understanding that I had of my faith was in ways quite narrow, quite reductionistic, and almost in ways maybe a bit sectarian. And he made very definite and clear links with the broader picture of, well, for a start, the concept of evolution, and then how creation itself is not a mere object or a mere thing that has been created once and for all, but creation itself is a kind of an evolving, growing, developing story. Now, whereas Teilhard was using evolution in that very broad sense, what I found particularly attractive, because at the time I was trying to make sense of a lot of things within my theology, particularly from the point of view of Christian anthropology. And Teilhard began talking about ourselves as a species who have also evolved, and evolved not merely over a few thousand years, but indeed over a much longer period. And that's the subject of my most recent book, Divine Radiance in Human Evolution. So my Christian Catholic upbringing was very much a story of 2,000 years, and that really nothing of significance had happened for us before that time. That is, with the coming of God in and through the person of Jesus, that humanity really arrives on the planet. And even though that was put in terms of the creativity of God, there was also something very problematic about us as a species. We were fundamentally flawed. We were going through this vale of tears, waiting for the deliverance or liberation at the end of life. And for me, Teilhard began to question all that, even though he wasn't questioning it directly, in opening up this bigger, wider horizon. And that has been a major dimension of my research over several years now.
You talk about that's one thing that really impresses me, that you clearly love the church, and you are a very keen person who can critique it from your point of view, like the old myth of Christianity, that everything was fine in heaven, and then these fallen rebellious angels got us into trouble, and they came down to earth, and
Right.
then of course, then they propagated, and of course, oh my gosh, sexual intercourse, that's not allowed, and then we became flawed, and you really pose that's the old myth, and then after you die, you go back up to heaven and everything's okay again. And
Yes.
and you're really helpful to help people beyond our early religious upbringing. And instead of offering this much broader story. And of course, Teilhard de Chardin, then Thomas Berry came along with the universe story, using some of Teilhard's work, a lot of, and then expanded. You see, I think it's very important, because for years, especially my work beginning at Grace Cathedral, we were talking about spiritual hunger. And to me, that's where people tune in, like, oh yeah, spiritual hunger, that's what's gnawing at me. And then in your Reclaiming Spirituality, you have several statements. One, I hunger for a spiritual nourishment that involves something more than the church is offering me. And most people working with the labyrinth, most people searching even without the labyrinth, have that feeling, for sure. Second one, I hunger for a nourishment that transcends the polemics of religious imperialism. And this is where you really come to a point. We need to transcend the narrow focus on the individual hero whom we have made so heavenly that we frequently betray the incarnational engagement, which seems to have been central to Jesus's own life, and which for people are hungering today. And you named several others of the hunger. And I think now that the public and people that are sitting in the pews on Sunday morning feeling, what's wrong? What am I missing? How come this isn't connecting to me anymore? I think you're answering that the frame is way, way too narrow, and you open it up to the broader evolutionary. We are a species that is also evolving.
Yes, right. Yeah.
And
so then the other speaker that's going to be at this event, Brian Swim, I mean, he has been hugely influential also in my thinking. And the problem or the challenge, I think, which I met particularly working with people in the United States of America, is over the past 50 years or thereabouts, we have been growing, a huge number of people have been growing into the sense of a larger creation to which we belong. And this figure of 13, it used to be 13.7 billion, it's now, I think, 13.8 billion years. It's amazing how many people are now beginning to use that phrase as if it was a daily statement. Whereas, in fact, to get one's head around it could take a whole lifetime. But you see, it's not so much about the head. It's people have a kind of an internal sense that there's something very profound in that date, that it's opening up the bigger picture, the deeper picture, and so forth. And when I first began visiting the United States in the late 1980s, I began meeting quite a significant number of people that were able to resonate with that big date and take it internally as part of their spiritual search, but were finding a huge conflict between that vision and the vision of their Christian faith.
Mhm.
And of course, the reason was because they were operating out of a vision of the Christian faith that was far too narrow, too reductionistic, and too problematic along the lines that you have just been enumerating. Now, the statement that I find myself often making to those kind of people, and indeed to people still right up to the present time, more and more people are beginning to identify with this enlarged cosmic story and planetary story. But for the greater part, we do not yet have a human story to match the elegance of the cosmic and planetary story.
Mm.
We have it scientifically, except it's a more recent development in a science called paleoanthropology, the study of human origins, which is a very rigorous field of study. But for some reason or other, it hasn't gained as yet the popularity of the new cosmology, the new story, quantum physics. So we need the human story, it seems to me, this enlarged human story, to be able to embrace and integrate all these enlarged enlarged horizons as well.
And this is what your very recent book, which has not arrived at my doorstep yet because it's due out on May 28th.
Yeah, right.
And so this goes right into divine radiance and human evolution.
Yes, correct.
So tell us, I want to make sure to include your book, and I thought a little later on, but this is a perfect point to do that. Tell us about, and so this is what he's teaching in Chartres. So come on in, please.
Yeah, okay. So very quickly, the recent part of it, so it's over 100 years ago now since people began looking at our human story, and picking up a sense that it's a story that's quite vast and enlarged, that somehow or other we haven't become acquainted with as yet. However, for me, 1959 is a very critical date here, in which a husband and wife team called Mary and Louis Leakey were searching for animal bones in northwestern Tanzania in East Africa when they came across the remnants of a human skeleton. And the geologists working with them and other geologists that were brought on board all agreed that the part of the skeleton they were working with was found in a layer of rock that was 2 million years old. Now, very interestingly, the Leakeys totally dismissed it originally. See, they came from a Christian background. They were saying, no, that's nonsense. There were no human beings around 2 million years ago. And when they wrote it up in a scientific article and sent it around to the various journals, and I find this very interesting in terms of the evolutionary shifts we're now living through. When they sent the article to various journals, none of the journals would accept it. They said, this is nonsense. And it was only in 1964 that the article was eventually published in some very small, little-known journal. And so that was the beginnings of an awakening. Then we have an American man called Donald Johanson, began moving to Africa, and he discovered the skeleton of a young female called Lucy. That was in the early 1970s. And that brought the picture then into Ethiopia and East Africa. Then Ethiopia at the time was governed mainly by tribal peoples who became very scared of all these foreigners coming in. So they put an embargo on all foreigners coming in for about 10 years. So effectively, this story takes off in a more coherent way in the early 1990s, with a man called Tim White from the University of Berkeley being the big significant name. And under his guidance, we came up with what was the first official date for the beginnings of our species 4.4 million years ago.
4.4 billion years ago.
Yeah. And then in the year 2000, a French team found a skull, just a skull, in Chad in North Africa. And when they subjected that to the rigorous scientific work we do today, by taking it around the world to various laboratories, and then taking a period of 7 years before they eventually pronounced, they said the skull is actually 7 million years old and is not a proto-human, it's a human being. And that's the date. So that is the date, 2007, that we're now working with. Our species has been on the Earth for 7 million years. Wow. And it's something the sciences generally as well as our politics, our economics, and our religions, they don't seem to be aware of this fact, never mind come to terms with it yet. And so to me, this is an enormous challenge. So then my final point, before you come back in, I approach this then from a theological angle. Basically, I raised the question, well, what is God's story for our species? What's our sacred story? It's not a story of 2,000 years. It's not merely a story of 5,000 years. Our God was fully with us for 7 million years. And that's the bit theologically and spiritually we have got to come to terms with.
Well, and that whole sense of that the human race is also evolving.
Right.
One of the things I think you do wonderfully in your work is that you help us see the blinders that the human race has on.
Sure.
And patriarchy, and like you're saying, that nobody believed the Leakeys for how many years because it couldn't be possible. But you're very good at naming what keeps us focused on an anthropocentric attitude. The human is the apex of everything that's meant to be on Earth, and we're the center of everything. And all we need to do is keep more and more and more in our lives and keep, raping the Earth, and that you really help take off the blinders and the screen that we all have, and including our personal religious upbringing.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's very profound. So I think I borrowed it from your wonderful book, Incarnation, because that's one of the books I would recommend, and that's on the reading list, is you really contextualize then the life of Jesus coming in this evolutionary story and the significance of that. And then one of your very important insights, why in the world does the church focus on the death of Jesus instead of the life that he lived?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And also in naming that, you help people see about the church, that it's far more important to and unfortunately, that with the our unfortunate history turning away from the Celtic tradition, which did and does honor the earth, all of a sudden we're focused on sin and salvation.
Yeah, in a very narrow sense.
In a very narrow sense.
Yes.
Yeah. And then what's lost is the creativity, the true revelation, the true understanding, the true unfolding of our whole universe, which includes us.
Yes, and our place within it, our more legitimate place within it. And so that's one of the terms that we're now trying to come to terms with. And this idea of naming ourselves as earthlings, as creatures of the earth. And then the second dimension that requires and will be requiring a lot of attention for the foreseeable future, this concept of the soul, which we find in all the religions, but the history of that concept is only about 2,500 years old. Essentially, we trace it back to Plato and Aristotle. And for those two philosophers, and for Greek anthropology generally, the soul is the life principle. And there were some fundamentalist Christians back in the middle of the last century, and indeed I think there were even some Catholics of my own denomination, who had this idea that as the fetus is developing in the mother's womb, at some stage God sends an angel down from heaven to inject a soul into it, and then it becomes a person. And then, of course, Christian spirituality, and indeed other spiritualities too, have this idea then that is the salvation of the soul that really matters, nothing else. And at the end of our lives, the soul will escape from this prison, if you like, to the fullness of life in another realm outside this world. Now, none of that really makes much sense anymore. What we need to replace it with, which is and our anthropology and our paleoanthropology is helping us out in this process, is that we are creatures of spirit energy. Spirit energy is the stuff that energizes us. And it's there from the very moment of conception. We don't need an external agent like an angel or anybody else injecting it.
Injection.
Yeah, it's there in the very love and intimacy of the couple and their desire to procreate. So that spirit energy is part and parcel of our lives. And what I find interesting here is a very human example. If you talk to people working in hospice care, they'll very often tell you that when they're sitting with a dying person, they can feel the energy evaporating, or they can feel the energy going. And that's not their imaginations, that's for real. Because we believe what happens to us at the end of our lives, these various energy fields around our bodies, which are the life force connecting us with the wider creation and connecting us with that divine reality we call God, those energy fields begin to evaporate or disappear. I'm just using that word for the moment. I'll change it in a second. And okay. To the point where we're just left with what healers and others call the aura, the energy field closest to the body. And when that evaporates or disappears, then we die. Now, anybody who has a basic knowledge of physics or a basic knowledge of science will know that energy does not disappear or evaporate. Energy is always contained. Energy always reconnects with other energy. So that energy constellated in my body, in my earthly life, as I come to the end of my lifespan, that energy in this physical configuration will reconnect with the great energy fields of creation. Now, the great Eastern religions call that reincarnation. And so this energy will reconnect with the great energy fields of creation. So our beloved dead, they're all around us and all within us, at other levels of energy. So that word soul then is a distraction from the deep meaning of all that material. So we need to create a new Christian anthropology vocabulary now. We are earthlings. It's in and through our earth that we connect meaningfully with this energy. It's in and through our status as earthlings that we grow, develop, and evolve to become the creatures we're meant to become. And in our death, we don't escape out of creation. We reconnect with creation. Which is part of this new anthropology.
Yes, and which is one of the major principles of evolutionary understanding. It's birth, death, and rebirth.
Correct.
You know, we're not going off to some heaven. We are reconstituting in another form. And I always appreciate when you bring in the Eastern traditions. It is named reincarnation. Yes. For us, it's named resurrection, but not in the way of flying off, into something else. Right. There's this wonderful outline of our earthliness. Again, this is in the book Reincarnation. Our earthliness constitutes our primary identity as divinely created beings. It is in and through our earthliness that the divine works most effectively and creatively in us.
Absolutely.
You're able to ground these concepts that are so important. And that's why you mentioned Brian Swinn's work. And Brian is teaching the second week after Diarmuid, and he's focused on the cosmology end of it, and you're focused on the spirituality end of it. And it's a wonderful package that we put together here. For sure. And we'll talk, there is a discount for people attending both weeks. So the sense that you bring to your writings, you're also, I find this very interesting, you're also a social psychologist. Tell us about that part of your journey, a priest and social psychologist.
Well, I'm fortunate to belong to a little known religious order called Missionaries of the Sacred Heart. And we always have had the option between what we call social ministry and pastoral ministry. Now, when we say pastoral ministry, we mean priestly ministry in parishes, the more conventional kind of thing that a priest does. So we're all ordained, but a certain percentage of our members do not work in parishes. We work instead in social ministry. So a number of my colleagues who work in retreat work, who work in counseling or psychotherapy. And in my case, I was working more, social work was my original background. So I spent the early years of my life working as an AIDS HIV counselor. And then I went into doing work for about 5 or 6 years with asylum seekers and refugees. That was all in London and the United Kingdom. But for me, one of the great benefits that came out of that background, which is relevant to our conversation, when we say a social scientist, we're talking about psychology, sociology, and anthropology. And for me, for a lot of my colleagues who were studying with me, the psychology and sociology became the main stuff, whereas for me, the anthropology became the main stuff, because I was able to link it in then with my theology and spirituality. So my background as a social scientist is relevant, yes.
And it's very helpful, and it shows in your books, because it shows your social ministries as a counselor and a HIV counselor. It brings the earthiness. A lot of times, and I appreciated also your comments about interfaith ministry. It doesn't grapple with the human issues.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Doesn't grapple with the spiritual journey that we're all on. And that we're seeking, and we're looking for answers, and we're putting things together as best we can, but for the most part, without the bigger picture. We still have those blinders of patriarchy and power over, and that right now most churches, at least in the United States, are going into survival mode. And when you're surviving, you're not paying attention to people's needs. You're paying attention to the institutional needs.
Yeah.
And so that is a very clear message that we need to sort this out, but we also have to see through into a bigger vision. And you offer that bigger vision. You truly do, with a very honest heart. Have you had much criticisms about your criticisms of the church?
Well, I haven't had. And again, I'm in a very fortunate position there, because all my life I've worked as a social scientist. Even though I work a lot in theology, and I love theology and scripture, I don't call myself a theologian, and I don't work in the inner institutions of the church itself. Even though I love the church in terms of, in the recent death of Pope Francis and the emerging journey towards the new Pope, a lot of the media were quoting a figure. And unfortunately, probably most of the hearers were not picking up the power of the message. They were using this figure of 1.4 billion people. I mean, that is the population of the Catholic Church around the world. The bit they didn't give us, which would get things in a clearer perspective, the perspective that's very important for me as a social scientist, is that the total number of clergy in the Catholic Church, including bishops, cardinals, and the Pope himself, is 407,000. Now, 407,000 out of 1.4 billion means less than 1%.
Yes, and
so I've never identified, even though I'm a priest myself, I've never identified strongly with the clerical side of the church. I rejoice in the fact that I belong to this amazing, amorphous, international, interdenominational family spread across the entire planet. And again, the media have a tendency, they were doing it again over the past few weeks, hoping the new Pope might help to sort out the divisions within the Catholic Church. It's not the divisions that need attention. It's the huge diversity that's there. And obviously it has to be honored and respected when you're dealing with 1.4 billion people spread across the entire planet. That's the church I identify with.
Yes.
That it's an amazing family to be a part of.
Yes, and that perspective is helpful. And also, you're very specific. You're a feminist. You're in every sense of the word. That of those 4.47 whatever thousand people running the church, there's no women, and you're very clear on that. It's also, you're following in a way Thomas Berry's work. You include the indigenous. Your word for God is the Great Spirit.
Yes.
You're very much a feminist in terms of really pointing toward where women are devalued and seen as weak and second citizens, coming from, of course, our Greek philosophers in the early centuries. You honor the church as it is today, and for its diversity. It's very important. I feel the same way. I feel the same way with the fortunateness of being at Grace Cathedral. I describe it as an open-minded, open-hearted Christianity. And yet it's still caught in some of and not so heavily laden as some evangelical churches that the human is the only thing, we're the apex of evolution. It's like, I'm sorry. They got that one wrong, huh? Well, I want to open this up to Chartres, and you haven't been to Chartres with us, so we're going to show a PowerPoint in a moment. What I found, Diarmuid, is to put it this way, and this is from one of your books, that humans, we are in our fourth version. Homo sapiens are 4.0. And there's a new version, and you're wonderfully outlined how important meditation is, how important imagination is, how important intuition is. And that 5.0 human, it's a working name, folks. It's, who knows, but it's Homo imaginans.
Okay, yeah.
And I just like to put that out to people. Imagine what the Homo 5.0 is going to be like. And we need imagination, we need intuition, we need everyone equal citizen on the planet. Women, men, people of color, all sexual orientations. Your vision points toward that. And I really want to encourage people to take advantage of being at Chartres with us. So we'll shift gears here a little bit, and if there's anything at the end you want to bring in, your week is called Celebrating Divine Radiance in Human Evolution. And so you really are picking up that piece about, yes, human evolution, and that needs to catch up with some of the cosmology and the bigger versions. You understand, folks, that this is new information coming toward us, not only because of the leakies, but also because of the Webb telescope, the new telescopes, the new way of understanding, hearing now the microcosmic radiation in the universe. All of this is happening probably the last 10, 20 years. So the leakies are a little before that.
And let me add in, because just as a reassurance to folks, AI will contribute, or has the potential to contribute significantly to this enlarged horizon as well as helping to ground us and connect us as earthlings. Now, I agree that in the management of AI, we do need to draw up ethical and moral guidelines. Otherwise, it'll be in the hands of a few people who could do a lot of destruction with it. But potentially, it has an enormous richness that can open us up to the mystery that we are a part of. And just a very little quick anecdote, and I don't have the full information on this because it was only drawn to my attention literally 2 days ago. Here in my home country of Ireland, there's one of our professors in the university where I studied myself, called Trinity College. And he has developed a set of AI mechanisms and procedures to enable people to communicate with trees. And the mechanism is such that the tree will speak back. Now, to my mind, that's mind-blowing, and it opens up a vast new horizon of possibility, of creativity, of imagination.
Right, it sure does. It sure does. And you're right. I mean, AI needs some guardrails for sure. We don't want it to fall in the hands of just the people who can afford it or whatever. But it is now. It is open for everyone. But it does bring new horizons.
Oh yeah.
And it's part of evolution. The human being created it, and here we are with it. So. Here I am at Grace Cathedral in 1991, and having had this important experience with the labyrinth through Jean Houston. And I was working with AIDS ministry then as well, and I was totally overwhelmed. I was just totally overwhelmed. And we were administrating programs, buddy groups and Group for the Worried Well, and helping people go to get tests as well. And I know we needed something for the community that we could do together, prayerfully, non-verbally, because people couldn't talk about it. And all of that led me to Chartres Cathedral. And so here, Chartres is in the distance. You can see it from 8 miles away. And this is just simply a sketch of that. Thanks, Lars. Yeah, go ahead there. So people are pilgrims in motion, moving through territories not their own. And when you're traveling the Chartres, you'll realize that. Seeking something we might call completion, or perhaps the word clarity will do just as well, a goal to which the spirit's compass points the way. And that's, and quoting Richard Nieberg. We want to have this symbol in your mind because you'll see it all throughout Chartres. It's the Pilgrim's Path. And on the right is this scallop shell. St. James, the great pilgrim, uses that as a symbol, and it's been a symbol down through the ages as well. So here we are seeing Chartres, and in the foreground here, you can see flags and that. Well, that's a group of pilgrims making their way to Chartres Cathedral. They have quite a walk ahead of them, but they're gathered together. And when we feel we belong, the path is much easier for sure. And so there is again Chartres. And here's a specific map of the city. The cathedral is yes, Paris, and then we're southwest of Paris. And in the city itself, the cathedral is central to the whole geography of the town. This is more kind of the medieval town there as well. And then the construction. And the cathedral that is there nowadays was started in 1194. There were other versions. It is the only cathedral, only church named originally for Mary. It's Our Lady of Chartres Cathedral. And other, there's St. Mary's Wimbledon and all that, but those became later. There were 4 other cathedrals there that burned to the ground. They were made of oak. They burned to the ground. And then they found a quarry about 5 kilometers away and began to build the cathedral that you will see if you come on this journey with us. And so these are depictions of that. Take a moment to take this in. You see the buildings lower than the cathedral with the black roofs. We're going to show you because that's one of the places that people can stay. It's actually a converted monastery, and it's now a guest house, and most of our people stay there. And here we are, the Loire River, the Chartres Cathedral, and Chartres itself is embraced by rivers, and it's the Loire River. And that's actually how they brought some of the stone. There's a lot of story here that will fill out in Chartres, but this is how they brought the stone up to the cathedral, as well as by road as well. And here we're looking, yes, and this is valuable. On the left is then, on the right is now. Slightly different angle. And we're looking at the south. And again, these are the rose windows that are both in the south on the right and on the north. Folks, you will be seeing one of the finest collections in the world of stained glass windows. And many of them date back to the original cathedral. They have their story as well of the Great Fire in June of 1194. And that's when they began to rebuild the cathedrals. So Notre Dame of Belvedere, Our Lady of the Beautiful Glass, is one of the original pieces of the windows that was not destroyed in the fire. And this is highly revered, a beautiful, beautiful piece of stained glass artistry. Our Lady of the Pillar. This is a controversy. We can talk about the controversy in Chartres. She was much more dark-skinned when we first began coming to Chartres Cathedral in 1991. We began this program in 1998, and then she was supposedly taken back to the idea of the 16th century, where she would be much more lighter skinned. And again, there's the controversy. It's online. Jill Jeffreyon has done a fair amount of writing about that as well. So, and this is also, understand that most of these great cathedrals had some kind of relic. And again, there's controversy around that. There's all of that. But this veil was given to the cathedral in 876 by Charles the Bald, who was the grandson of Constantine. And it's revered, it's there, it has been carbon dated to be indeed being going back to the 1st century and definitely in Palestine. So there's again much more history to be telling about this. This is Our Lady Solitaire, Notre Dame de Solitaire, Our Lady under the earth, and she is in the crypt. This is actually a dark Madonna, not a black Madonna, meaning she was made later on, and again, after the fire that was there. So, and here's the labyrinth. This is taken from the keyhole in the roof. Beautifully done. Sometimes people think the labyrinth is sort of etched into the stone. Oh my heavens, that's so inaccurate. This is a stonework. We date it back, if we're going to be specific, usually 1201 is the date I say. That's coming from John James, the Australian architect who studied all of Chartres. And here's the 1750 lithograph of the Labyrinth Walk. We've had our archivist look at this and historians. And in a way, you could understand the labyrinth sort of as a layperson's tool, a layperson's practice. We've dated the clothing that people have, and that's where the 1750 date comes. You can see in the back the rood screen. Again, you may not know what that is, and we would talk about that, but that divided the cathedrals. It was something people did those days. The priests were up in the high area, the sanctuary, and the lay folks were out walking the labyrinth. So yes, and this is again the stone. There is not a lot of war damage done to Chartres Cathedral compared to others. The center being ripped up is part of it, and we'll tell you that story as well. But this is the center of the labyrinth. And if you walk in the Chartres Cathedral and say, well, I didn't see any labyrinth, that's because of all the chairs. But you can see the center of it. And sometimes you see people just sitting there and you're thinking, why are they sitting in the main pathway of the where the crowds would be? And they're sitting there because it's the center of the labyrinth. Again, this is Fridays. The labyrinth is open on Fridays. We have a private evening in the cathedral on Thursday night. Then we light the labyrinth as you're seeing it here. Oh yes, the light show. Every night, I believe all year, every night, a light show happens. It's outside. There's actually 23 locations for light shows every night, but the cathedral is the main one that shows the history of the cathedral and the history of the region, as well as, I think on the left, you're singing King Louis. So they go through French history as well. It's beautifully done. Again, another simple, actually, this is the north part, and they studied the colors when they were cleaning the cathedral. And they realized, because this was the, the kingdom of heaven, this is the jeweled city of Jerusalem. And they realized that it was painted beautifully on the outside, and then what they did is capture those paintings and those colors in light. And then this is part of the light show, but showing one of the original ways they understood that the cathedral was painted. Now, the building on your left with the black roof, that's the Hotelleria, where people stay. There are other choices, but most people stay here, and this is where our classrooms are held as well. And so we want you to look on the left here. This is the entrance to it. If you've signed up for the program, this is what you'll be looking for to enter in. And there's lovely rooms. Every room has private bathroom as well, kind of a marine bathroom, but everyone has privacy that way. There's doubles or singles. The upper right is our breakfast room where people are sharing their morning, and the lower right is one of our classrooms. I believe that's probably a facilitator training there that's happening. And again, as I mentioned, it's a reconstituted, remodeled monastery that's into a retreat house now. Ah, the labyrinth. This was made by Veritas in 2011, and it's sort of a secret. It's in the back of the hotelleria. People come and walk it and ask to walk it, which is fine if you use Veritas's name. And it's the ground has assumed it now. This is an earlier picture. It's quite an amazing labyrinth for sure. Yes, retreats. This is a pilgrimage leaving Chartres. They've been there a day or so. I love the upper left. Look at the friendship there. Look at the friendship. So you see unusual things like that. It happens often in Chartres. Be unusual to most of us. So unlike mere travel, a pilgrimage is a journey into the landscape of the soul. And the soul not defined by the Greeks, but by us. And that's a quote from Vivian Hall. And this is just a late painting, so that I have behind me actually too. So Diarmuid, it'd be fun to welcome you to Chartres.
Thank you. Sounds very good. Interesting.
Yeah, it's a lovely program, and we begin on Monday afternoon, thinking people might come to Paris, get rid of their jet lag. We begin with an orientation and just what our course is about and the outline of the week. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday for 2 hours. That's when the main content happens. And then after that, we have a break, but also then people move to a small group, 6 or 8 people. You get to know one another. It's sort of a identity group, entity group in the sense that, you want to go to lunch with somebody, you know someone to go to lunch with, things like that. And they really become quite connected in terms of people sharing their spiritual journey with one another. And we end Friday night with a celebratory dinner. And so people stay over definitely to Saturday morning at least. And sometimes I would encourage people, sometimes people stay over till Sunday or whatever, and then take the train back up to Paris and fly back home or go on to another journey in France as well. So we're introducing Dawn Matheny, who's our executive director and part of our team in Chartres. We have 2 people that are event people on the ground in Chartres with us. So have I covered everything, Dawn?
I think so. I mean, I could go into logistics of how you get from the airport to Chartres, but we'll save that for the people that sign up because we'll be doing an orientation with a lot of logistical information in, I would say, early August.
Yeah, a month out.
Have a Zoom meeting and go over details. So we also will connect you with each other once you've registered. So those of you who would like to travel together can make contact with each other. So all that's coming, very exciting to think about packaging Diarmuid's Week with Brian's Week. And if you are interested, there is a 10% discount on the total. You would email dawn@veriditas.org and we'll make sure that you get that discount code. Or get an invoice that has the 10% benefit on it. So the housing, which you can see actually right behind me there, it does have a tendency to fill up. So we would like to invite you to register early. It's most convenient to stay in the Hotellerie Saint-Yves. The rooms are simple and comfortable, and each one has its own bathroom. Small, but comfortable and clean. So yeah, it's to me, Chartres is a very heart-opening place where you can feel the veil as thinner. And so the information that Diarmuid will be sharing with us enriches and enhances that sense of the other worlds being close by. So.
Yeah, and one of the things I think is important about this program is we don't pack everything in. You have a tour of the cathedral, yes, but you have evenings to yourselves or lunch together, but it's not packed. It gives you time to kind of unpack your lives and also to be able to process the content of the morning. And so, and also, if you do both weeks, your weekend will be free. That would be a time to go up to Paris, for instance, and then come back down for the Monday orientation for the next week. And so something to think about.
I just wanted, there is one thing we forgot. We have invited a superb celloist to be with us for openings in the morning and for the labyrinth walk in the cathedral. And many of you know him. It is Rob Hodges. And I see that he's on the call with us today, but that will be a very special, piece of the offering that week as well.
Okay, so feel free to email Dawn at veritas.org or myself, Lauren at laurenartist.com if you have other questions. Space is limited, folks, so that's important to know. And then we would have to close the event because partly because mostly about the private labyrinth walk that we want to meet not only the cathedral's time requirement, but we want to make sure there's room for everyone. So we limit it to around 30 or so. So, okay, well, thank you. Thank you. I hope this has been helpful to people. And if you have other questions, sometimes I find, and I was saying to Diarmuid before, if you're afraid, this has been on your bucket list, folks, and if you're afraid to go to a country where you don't speak the language, let all those fears just be there, yeah, but they're not significant. You can find people to speak English. You can also, Veritas, gives clear guidelines as well. And believe it or not, Uber is one of the best ways to get around in France. And so we can answer those questions and you can travel together. We'll introduce you to Circle if you have signed up, and that will be in early August. We usually do it about a month out because then people start planning around that time. So there would be help that way as well. So we'd have another Zoom around that. So thank you all for being here. And thank you, Diarmuid. This is wonderful. We'll meet in person at some point.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we will.
Yeah, just delightful. So thank you, folks. And thanks, Dawn and Lars, for helping this. And take care, all. Take care. Hope to see you in Chartres.